Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first live stream of Learning Music Skills. My name is Xander. I'm a bit nervous for this first live stream, but I hope together that we'll manage to make this happen for the first time. During this live stream, I have prepared some material which I will talk about. But at any time, you can ask me a question and just write it in the chat. I'll keep my eye on the chat and to answer any questions that you have, music-related questions. So let's get to it. Let me show you the screen that I'm looking at also. So what I want to start with is a story that when I was recording guitar for a friend of mine, and there was one point where I said, you're playing in your composition, you have a C sharp. And he said, no, it's a D flat. Well, actually I said, well, it's the same. And I did not understand why it was not the same. So that's what I want to talk about a bit today, together with talking about chord progressions and actually some basic music theory. So here we have a major scale. And I'm not sure what the level of music theory knowledge is of the people watching today or who will watch it later. So I'll just start with the basics, and if it's too basic, then just write in the chat and let me know. But let's get started. So I've written here the C major scale. And why is this scale so important? Because every time people talk about the major scale, and actually, at some point, I was a bit annoyed because it felt like we're only talking about one scale. But I'm going to show you why it's so important. So first of all, for the people who might not be able to read notes, I'm going to write all the note names underneath so that you can follow with me. Okay, so here we have all the notes of the C major scale. We have the C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And if you look at this from the C to the D, here if you look at the piano, we have two steps, or two half steps as we call it, because we have one black key in the middle. So from here to here is one whole step. I'm going to write it here. And the software that I'm working in at the moment is MuseScore for the people who want to also use this for writing music. It's free to use, so it's definitely recommended. Then if we continue from the D, and you see it will light up here the key that I'm currently selecting. And if we go from the D to the E, we can see that again we have one black key in the middle. And each step is a half step. So this is two steps, or two half steps. So again, we have one whole step. So I'm going to write one whole step. Okay, now let's take a look from the E to the F. From the E to the F, we have half a step, because as you can see, we have no black keys in the middle. So I'm going to write 1/2. So that's a half step. Okay. And I see some people coming in. I want to. Unfortunately, I cannot see the participant list. I don't know how. So if you're new here, just give me a shout out. Okay, so from the E to the F, we have half a step. And now if I go from the F to the G, we again see that we have one step in between, so half step, a black key, and then we're on the G. So that means that we have one step again. And why I'm doing this with these whole step, half step, whole step, because if you follow this recipe or blueprint, that means that you can create any scale, any major scale that you want afterwards. And I will show you later on. So let's continue. We go from the G to the A. And when we go from the G to the A again, we see that we have half a step here in the middle. So that means half step equals a whole step. So from the G to the A is a whole step again. And then if I go from the A to the B, again, we have a black key in the middle, which means that we have a half step and another half step, which is one whole step. And now actually I should have written the C behind this. Let me see if I can add in one more note, because we want to finish it to the octave. There we go. And now if we see how much room we have between the B and the C, again we see we don't have any black steps in between, any black keys in between. So that means that we only have half a step over here. Okay? So now, our entire blueprint of making a major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And then we're back to the octave. So if I want to recreate this, so let's say now I want to make a scale in, let's say, D major. I'm going to follow this recipe that I just wrote out, this blueprint of whole step, half step, whole step. And I'm going to use this blueprint to make the D major scale and see if we, if it's actually correct what I just wrote down. So I'm going to start on the D here. It's highlighted. So I need a whole step. So if I half step, whole step. So my next note needs to be an E. Okay, so that's correct. So now if I do a whole step again, because I need another whole step. Well, if I count on the piano keyboard, you see that the next we have a white key here, which is F. But that's only half a step, and we need a whole step. So what I want to do is use a black key, because I need a whole step. So half step, half step. So if I fill in an F, that's not correct. I need to raise it to an F sharp to be able to get that whole step, whole step. Okay, let's continue. Let's continue. Now I need a half step. So now if I fill in a half step from F sharp, which is here, then I land on the G. Okay, so we fill in the G. Now I need another whole step. So if I go from G to A, that's a whole step. Now I need another whole step. So we're going to go from the A to here, we have a half step, and then another half step, which is the B. Okay, we've got that covered. Now we need another whole step. So how do we do that? We go from the B to the C. That's half a step. So we need to raise the C with half a step for it to become a C sharp to get that whole step. So I'm going to raise it. Here we have our C sharp. And now I need a half step to get us back to D. So that means that the blueprint that I just wrote out is actually, you can use that. I want to clean up this. Okay. Now let me write out the notes that I just wrote down. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and we're back to our home base, to our tonic, which is D. So why did I do this? Well, now we actually know any major scale that we want to make, we have the tools necessary. So this also gets me to my point where I said to my friend when we were recording something for him, when I said it's a C sharp chord, and then he said no, it's a D flat. Well, if I show you here on the notes in the notepad, just a second. So, for example, if I raise the C, here you see, if I raise the C with a half step, now we're on this black key, right? If I lower the D, which is here, if I lower this with half a step, we also land on this black key. So you see, that's where the confusion many times lies, because they're enharmonically the same. Okay, now what I want to do is, we have this major scale, which is nice, but how do we make chords out of this major scale? So how do we continue to make more resources out of this? Well, every triad, let me just adjust one thing. In music, when we, there we still see my screen, yeah, okay. So in music, one of the most important chords that we have is a triad. That's a normal chord. And how do we get that chord? Well, what we do is we take the root note. So, for example, I want to make a C major chord. What I do is I take the root note. That's also the note from which it gets, from where it gets its name. So when you have the C, I'm going to skip one note. So I'm going to skip the second note, but I'm going to choose the third note. So I'm going to add that on top. Now this is a third that I've added on top, a major third. Now if I continue adding notes, I'm going to skip the F, and then I'm going to add the G. So the thing is, with all these notes in the scale, we can assign them a number, which is also their scale degree, as it's called. So if I add in another line underneath, for example, the C is our first note in the scale. That's our root note. So that will be number 1. The D is our second note. So that will be number 2. The E is a third note. The F is a fourth note. The G is the fifth note. The A is the sixth note. The B is the seventh note. And when we're back to the C, that's the octave, that's the 8th. Okay. So now if I want to make a chord on top of the D, then I use the D, that's my first note from D. But again, I'm going to skip the second note, and I'm going to add the F. So if I want to add the next note, then I need to add the A. So I skip the G and add the A. So you see, we always count from the root note. So for example, from E, that's going to be our first note. So I skip the second note from E, which is the F, and I add the third note from E, which is the G. Let me add that one. And then I skip the fourth note from E, and I add the fifth note, which is the B. So these are our tones. And that's how you make triads. And the thing is, now I'm only using notes that are part of the C major scale. And then that's why it's so important, because now all these notes are part of the key of C major, because I'm only using these notes for making my chords. So if I continue quickly, not to make it too long, I'm going to again add the third tone and the fifth tone. So that will be A and C. And now if from the G, I want to add again the third tone from G, which is the B. And I need to count a bit further. So we have the B. This is 4 and this is 5. That's the there. And I'll do the same for the A. And I'll do the same for the B. And here we're back to the octave. So actually I did not have to do this one. Okay. So now what do we do with this? Because we have all these chords. But what can we actually do with these chords? Well, with these chords, we can start making chord progressions. And what you want to do is when you're in a certain key, so for example, now this is in the key of C major, what you want to do is start, for example, with your root, with your tonic chord, which is the C major. Now, if I want to continue my chord progression, I want to play, for example, the second chord, which here starts on the D. Let me fill in that chord. Now what I have is, let me play it. Okay, so that's great. So now we have the chord, our tonic chord, which is our number 1 chord. And we have the chord which is from the second scale degree. So let me write that down also. Now, if I want to continue, I could also just play again our tonic chord. That's possible. Then we have a progression that sounds like this. But the thing is, in classical music, and actually in music that follows functional harmony, we don't stick to only 2 chords. The thing is, we have a hierarchy with all these chords. So certain chords are more important than other chords. For example, your tonic chord, of course, is important because that is part of your key. But the next chord that's most important after your tonic is your dominant chord. And your dominant chord is the chord on the 5th scale degree. So if you look here from C, that is our G chord. And I forgot to write down what the gender of these chords is. So if they're major or minor. For example, the chord on the 2nd scale degree is a minor chord. The chord on the 3rd scale degree is also a minor chord. The F on the 4th scale degree is a major chord. The G is a major chord. And the A is a minor chord. And the B is a diminished chord. So what do we want to do in functional harmony? We want to use the tonic chord and the dominant chord. So, for example, after this chord, I could play the G chord. So now we would have this. I want to crank up the tempo a bit so it's not that slow. So 1 second. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Okay, this is not. And the numbers that I'm writing below are the Roman numerals. Maybe you've heard about that before. I'll also add that here. So we have 1, 2, 3. So this is the Roman numeral system that I'm now adding. 5, 6, 7, and we're back to 1 with this one. So the chord progression that I have now is a 1, 2, and a 5 chord. So if we want to take it back home, we finish on our tonic chord. So we would have this. And of course, I'm not taking voice leading into consideration. That's a topic that I've talked about before in one of my previous videos. So please forgive me with the voice leading, but this is just as an example. So this is, in Western music, this is a very important chord progression. The 1, 2, 5. So we also have another chord, which is also very important. And that's the chord on the 4th scale degree, which is called the subdominant. And the function of the subdominant chord, of this F chord here, this F chord takes us away from our home base. So you need to see it as such. We have our tonic chord, which is the C, and it's on the 1st scale degree. That's our home base. So there's no tension there. Everything is okay. We don't feel like we want to go anywhere after that. But our F chord here on the subdominant scale degree, this takes us further. This wants to take us for a trip, for example. So if I add that chord, and I'll write in the F chord here, F, A, C, and now also to like this. Okay. So the function of a subdominant chord is to take you away, is to continue the movement. And the function of a dominant chord, which is the number 5, is to take you back to our tonic chord, our number 1 scale degree. So for example, it would sound like this. So maybe you've heard that before, this chord progression. So that chord progression is very important. Just 1 second, struggling with the visual here. Greetings, ape not monkey. If you have any questions or suggestions in the meantime, be sure to let me know. It has a bit of a delay sometimes, the chat and my live stream, so I might not respond straight away. But okay. There we go. So what can I do further with this information? Well, for example, I can also now create the chords. For example, if I have a piece of music that's in the key of D major, then I can also add, yeah, sure, no problem. So for example, if I want to create a piece of music in the key of D major, and if I want to know what the dominant chord is in the key of D major, then I can just make my chords by using the scale. So for example, we skip the 2nd note from D and we go straight away to the F to create our tonic chord. And then again, if I want to add the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th, so we have the E, the G, and the B. Now if I want to make a chord on the 3rd scale degree, on the F, I again skip 1 note, then I go to the A, then I skip 1 note, and I go to the C sharp. And I continue with like this all the way up. There. There we go. And if I write down the Roman numerals, which are the scale degrees, we have our number 1, we have our number 2, we have our number 3, we have our number 4, which is our subdominant. So remember, that's an important chord. Here we have our number 5, which is the dominant chord. Here we have our number 6. And here we have our number on the 7th scale degree, that's the diminished chord. I will write that here also. So for example, if I wanted to make this progression, which is called a 1-4-5 progression, if I wanted to make this in the key of D major, then I just look at what kind of chords I have on the 1st, 4th, and 5th scale degree. And I know this, I have them now because I made the scale before. So here we see we have an, let me write down the genders again. Also, this stays the same. For every major scale that you make, this stays the same. So your tonic chord is major, the chord on the 2nd scale degree is always minor, on the 3rd scale degree is always minor, on the 4th is always major, 5th always major, and on the 6th is always minor, and the 7th is always diminished. So that's the rest. That's a blueprint that you can always follow. So that's why I can, like on an automatic pilot, I can just fill in all the notes. Here we have, okay, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, and this is C sharp diminished. That's a bit of an oddball, that chord. We will not get into that today. But now, what I want to do is I want to create a 1-4-5 progression in the key of D major. Let's see if I can do that. So I just take the chord from the 1st scale degree, paste it here. Then I take the chord from the 4th scale degree, which is our subdominant chord. I paste it here. And then I take the chord on the 5th scale degree, which is the dominant. And then I want to go back to my tonic, because the dominant chord wants to go back to the tonic chord. So I write it down. So one thing that I want to show you also is, why does this chord, this A major, our dominant chord, why does it want to take us back to the tonic chord? And I'll show you why that is, because it has to do with how close the notes are. So for example, I need to go back to the C major scale for this. As you could see, we have here from B to C, that's half step, so that's a leading tone. So for example, I'll play it now with the keyboard, the major scale. So if I would stop, so first I'll play the major scale from C to C, so the full octave. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop playing on the B. And then you can hear for yourself how strong that B wants to resolve towards the C. It wants to resolve back to the tonic. So first I'll play it from C to C. So everything is fine. It resolved perfectly now. But now I'm going to stop playing on the 7th scale degree, on the B. So you see that B really wants to resolve. So if you look at what chord has that B in it, that is the G major. So that's the chord on our dominant, on our 5th scale degree. So that's called the leading tone. The 7th tone in the major scale is called the leading tone. So that's already a very important note. Now if I look at this note, what it has above here is the D. And if we go to the piano here below, you can see the D here is blue. That D is one step below, one step above C. So it wants to resolve downwards. If I play here, this is the D. So this is our C. So that means that the chord on the 5th scale degree, the dominant chord, has two notes that wants to resolve to C. So here we had the B below, so that's a half step below the C. And we have the D, which is one step above the C. So that's where the tension comes from. And also, I cannot show you now because I don't have the lower octave in the piano. But let me add that really quickly. Because I want to show you what the bass always does. I just want to add this. Go bass clef. Let's see how this works. Okay, great. So now I added the bass clef because there's something else. So now I'm going to fill in also the bass notes here, for example. Here we have the C. This was the F. This was the G. So what happens here? So let me play this progression. I adjusted this. I'll write down below, for example, this. We have C, F, G, C. Okay. So if I play this progression, this is a 1-4-5-1 progression. Okay. Let me. No, I will not delete that. I'll just zoom in a bit. Okay, so I already showed you that this dominant chord has the leading tone in it, right? Which is the 7th scale degree. But when we look at what the bass does, the bass goes down a perfect 5th, and that's in music that's a very strong interval. So that's this interval. I will play it on the piano. You can't see it now. So this is a perfect 5th that I'm playing now, the interval. So that's because I said that's a very strong interval. And what happens here is that it falls down a perfect 5th. So that's something that really gives confirmation. This big jump down. So together with the bass, which jumps down with a perfect 5th, with the leading tone, which wants to resolve upwards, this B here. Let me make the voice leading correct so you can actually see how all of them want to resolve. So that's why this dominant is so important. And what we could even do extra is add the 7th to the chord. So what do I mean by that? Is I'm going to add the 7th tone from G. And this is a very important tone, which you see a lot in music, that it's added to the dominant chord, to the chord on the 5th scale degree. So I'm going to count from G all the way up 7 steps. So we have G is number 1, A is number 2, B is number 3, C is number 4, D is number 5, E is number 6, and F is number 7. And when I add that number 7 on top here, then we get this. And I'm going to make the voice leading now a bit better, so it actually sounds like some music already. So the progression would sound like this. I could also do this. Let me raise this down. sorry. So what the important thing is that this F, when I look at what this F does and how it corresponds to our tonic chord, as you can see, this F, I highlighted it here, you can see it now here. This F wants to resolve by half step downwards to the E. So again, we have this very strong drive towards your home bass, towards your tonic. So for example, I'm going to play now here on my keyboard next to me. I'll play only the root note, which is the G. I'm only going to play that F chord, which the F tone. And I'm going to resolve it to the E. This F will go to the E. And the G, in this case, will not go down, but it will go up to the C here. So this will happen. So if I play it, and you'll probably hear, this will probably sound familiar. So if I play it a bit lower, we have a little bit more bass. So this is, I think, a very familiar sound. So this is the dominant. So we have, this is our 1, 4, 5, 1 chord progression. And this is one of the most basic chord progressions around. And it this has been used in so much music, so many Mozart tunes, but also blues makes use of this. So it's definitely worth learning this. So now what I want to show you is how can we create even more tension? Because I wrote that I wanted to also show you how secondary dominants work. Well, secondary dominants is, and I need to find the best words to explain it. What you do with a secondary dominant is that you make a dominant before the dominant. So let me start over, and I'm going to again do everything in the key of C. So everything will be without sharps and flats. And I'm going to start with a clean slate below. No, I'll do it like this. It's not. There we go. Okay. So how do you find out what is the dominant for any chord? For example, if I want to make a dominant in front of the G chord, let me put the G chord here. Let me copy paste it. So here we have it already. So how do we find out what the dominant chord of G is? Well, it's actually easier than you think, because the dominant is always on the 5th scale degree. So if we look here, let's say that instead of C being now our tonic, G is going to be our tonic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count upwards from G, and I'm going to count upwards 5 tones, or 5 letters from the alphabet. So if I count up 5 letters from the alphabet, we have G, A, B, C, D. So that means that D is the dominant of G. So let me write that down. So first I'll start with the root note, which is the D. Okay. Then I'm going to write, what I want to do now is I want to make a major triad, because our dominant chord is always a major triad. So luckily, I already wrote the D major scale here. So in a D major chord, we have a D, an F sharp, and an A. So let me write that on top of here. So here we go. This is a D major chord. And this is now the dominant of G. But the thing is, if we are in the key of C major, this chord does not belong there because, you know, if I go up, so we have an F sharp, for example, here. If I go back to our C major scale, you can see that we don't have any sharps or flats. So, you know, how can this be? How can this exist in the key of C major? Well, that's the whole beautiful thing about secondary dominants, is that these chords, you borrow them from a different key, and that might sound more complicated than it is, so I don't want to throw in any extra terminology. So I think the best way for you to think about it or to approach it is to just think about it as a chord that is the dominant of the dominant. So now we have the D, which is a dominant of the G, and this will go back to our tonic chord. So let me write down here. And what I want to do now is I want to write the chord progression in front here also a bit. I want to start on the tonic chord, of course, because I want to confirm the key that we are in. And now let's see, what chord do I want to play? Well, I remember that the F chord, the subdominant chord here on the 4th scale degree, I remember that this one wanted to take us on a trip. This one wanted to take us away. So how about we write that chord? So I'm going to write down the F here. Oh wait, why is my keyboard not responding? Ah, there. Okay. I'm going to lower this one with a whole step. Okay. So now I just need to think, okay, what are the notes of our F major chord? So we have the F, we skip one note, then we have the A. So we have an A. I'm going to write it here. I'm going to go back here. So, okay, we from the A, and then we skip one note, and then we go to the C. And I'm going to add another F also. So now let me write down here that we have an F chord. So all of these chords are major, by the way. Now let's see what this sounds like. So also let me write down the scale degree here, so you can see. And what they always do with the Roman numeral system is that they, when we're talking about the secondary dominant, what we always do is write it in brackets. So we're going to write 5 in brackets. So then we always know, like, okay, wait, this is a chord that serves as a dominant for another chord. So in this case, because it's not part of the C major scale, not part of the key of C major. So that's why this always refers to the next chord, in this case G. So if you're in a score of music, if you play classical music or anything, and you know, you come across a chord that seems foreign to the key that you are in, for example, for us, which was the key of C major, then the thing is, what you need to do is you always need to look ahead. So where is it going? What is the, is it resolving to somewhere? What is the function? And many times then you will find the answer. So now let's have a listen to what it sounds like. Okay, so that sounded quite normal to me. But I just want to prove to you something, that it does add some extra spice, this chord, this secondary dominant as it's called. Because I'm going to take it out now and I'm going to play the progression again. And then you'll tell me if you think which one sounds a bit more, well, let's say spicier. So now it's without. Okay, so this sounds normal, and now I'm going to undo this. Now it's back. So you see, this chord definitely gives some extra vibe to it. But what I did now is I created a dominant, secondary dominant for our dominant scale degree. But it doesn't have to be for the G chord. For example, I can also write a secondary dominant in front of the F chord. So let me take this one out. So let's undo this. And I'm going to add one bar. Let's see where it adds it. Okay, I'm going to add one bar in front of the F. And I'm going to do the same trick. I'm going to make a dominant, so a chord that wants to push it towards its goal, which is the tonic. So I'm going to add a dominant chord in front of the F, in front of our F major chord. And the funny thing is that in C major, that is actually C, because if we count from F, let me count from F. We just do again the alphabet, and we just count each letter. So F, A, B, C. Wait, F, A, B, C. I'm skipping one. F, G, A, B, C. Sorry. So C is our fifth scale degree from F. So that would be our dominant. But we already have a C here. So how can we make this even more of a dominant than this C? Well, as you remember, I added to this G chord, I added a 7. And that 7 was a minor 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a 7th tone to the C chord, but then I'm going to make it into a minor 7. So let's do that. So I'm just going to copy this one completely like this. And the only thing I have to do is just lower this. If I go to B, that's a major 7. But if I go to B flat, we have ourselves a minor 7. So now all of a sudden, this becomes a dominant chord. So now also in our Roman numeral system, we need to write this, because this is a 5 for this chord. I might need to change the voice leading here now, because this wants to go down officially. Okay, let me just do it like that. So let me play the whole progression. So did you see that this created some tension? It wanted to go towards this chord. So now let me create one more progression in the key of C major. I always do the key of C major because it's just easier, because you don't have to deal with so many sharps and flats and whatnot. So again, I'm going to start on my tonic chord. So I'll just copy paste everything here. And I want this dominant chord to stay here also. I'm going to go for there. And also just this one here. And let's not be perfectionists here. And what I want to do, let's see what we can choose. What other chord we can do, which could be interesting. I don't want to go again with this, with the subdominant, with the 4th scale degree. So what I want to do is something that you hear a lot in music. Also, what we could do is we could go to the 6th scale degree, which is A minor. And then from A minor, from the 6th scale degree, maybe we can go to the 2nd scale degree, which is the D minor. So I'm going to write that in here. So we go, there you go. And our next chord was D minor. Maybe I want to do it like that. Yeah. And now I want to write in all the chord tones of A minor. A. There we go. And now of the D. I'm going a bit fast because I don't want to spend all the time on explaining all the notes, because the thing is you can just simply go back to the C major scale and then you know what notes you can choose. So you can always go back to that main source. So this chord, I just want to write down what it is. And this is a D minor. So the chord progression would sound like this. And this is a G7. Not unimportant. And it would sound like this. And I just quickly want to adjust the bass notes because I don't like how this sounds. There, I think this sounds a bit better. And now I also want to write down what scale degrees we're dealing with. And also you might have noticed that some of them I write with capital letters, and some of them I write with small letters. And the small letters, I write them when they're minor chords. So for example, this is our 6th scale degree, but it's a minor chord. So that's why I write it down like this. For example, our 5th scale degree is a major chord. That's why I write it with a capital V or capital 5. Okay, so now let's give it one more time. Let's give it a listen one more time. Quickly. Okay, well, that sounds fine. But now I want to spice things up a bit. I want to add a secondary dominant in front of the D minor chord. So in front of this chord. So first of all, of course, I need to insert another bar because I only do everything in whole bars now. But now what I want to do is I'm going to use the same tactic as I did before. I'm going to count from D, and I'm going to count 5 letters or 5 scale degrees upwards. So it's D, E, F, G, A. Okay, so that means that A is our dominant from D. So what I could even do, but needs to be A major, because only major chords can be dominant. So what I could even do is I don't have to add another chord actually. What I can do is just make this A into an A major. So let's do that. And how do I change it into an A major? Maybe you've seen one of my previous videos where I talk about what decides the gender of a chord. That's the third. And in an A minor, we're dealing with a minor third. So if I raise the third with half a step, then it turns into a C sharp. Oh, I see your question. Just 1 second, let me read it. Aha. Well, yes, actually, let me just finish this one and I'll get to that question straight away. So now what I did is I made this A minor, I made it into an A major. And then it also becomes a secondary dominant because it is the dominant before the D. So that's why, again, I write it like this. So you see, that's the difference, and it actually sounds nice. So that was the difference. So actually, only this one note makes the difference. So that's the beautiful thing about secondary dominants, is that you can put them in front of any chord that you want. You can put a secondary dominant. Just quickly to round things up about secondary dominants is that I can also add a secondary dominant in front of the A chord. So then we have a string of dominant chords. So if and now I'll do this one a bit quicker, not to keep you waiting. But if I count from the A 5 steps up, so A, B, C, D, E. So E is going to be the root note of our dominant chord. But we need to have an E major, because only major chords can be dominant chords. So if I go here, because I remember I had an E minor in our previous, in the normal key of C major. So that's E, G, B. That's an E minor chord. But again, I need to raise the third with half a step to make it into a major chord. And now we have, let me write it down here. And here we have, so now we have a dominant chord for a dominant chord for the second scale degree. So it sounds complicated, but so you see that's quite interesting. You can create a string of dominant chords, and that has happened in countless examples in music theory, actually. And now to get to your question, what I really like to do is, let me go to a clean sheet of paper and add some bars, and also maybe just group them into 4. So I really like to use modes for my inspiration for writing chord progressions. And what I always do is, so I don't know if I can dive into the system of modes, because that's quite a long explanation. But what I like to do is I start improvising in a certain mode. For example, in the morning when I'm doing my writing exercises, I just choose, okay, now I'm going to practice and I'm going to improvise in the Dorian mode. So then, of course, I need to find out what chords are part of the Dorian mode. And in this case, that's easy because actually I already have the chords here. I could even make it like that. But I force myself then that morning for 2 hours. I force myself to write in the Dorian mode, and it does not matter, you know, if it's D Dorian or E Dorian, etc. That does not matter. But I force myself to stay in that mode and to discover all of the colors that it has to add and that it has to offer. And that gives me some nice surprises, because it's sometimes certain modes are more difficult to write in. For example, if Phrygian can be tricky to write in, or if I write in the Lydian mode, it's also a bit more difficult. But that's definitely something that I find very inspiring to do, is to write in certain modes. But one technique, which I've actually made a video about before, which is called Chromatic Mediants, and this really it's ridiculous how easy this technique is, but how interesting, how good the results are. That's really Chromatic Mediants. Let me write the chord progression down for you so that we can see it. So I can actually, I don't know if you know what Chromatic Mediants are. So if you do, let me know, but maybe some other viewers would find it interesting. So, but Chromatic Mediants are mediants. Let me first write it like this. C, E, G, C. I'm going to write a C major, and I'm going to write an A minor. Okay, so this is our C major, and this is our A minor. So now, as you can see, they share quite a few tones. They share the C, because I could tie the C and I could tie the E. So they have a lot of tones in common. But the beautiful thing, wait, I'm skipping one thing. So this A minor, when chords are a third apart, they have a mediant relationship, as it's called. And in this case, they're diatonic because they're part of the same key. As you can see, I'm in the key of C major. I'm not adjusting any notes. I'm just choosing the chord that is on the 6th scale degree. Because this is on the first one, and this one is on the 6th one. And what you do with chromatic mediants is that you adjust the gender, as I always call it, of one of the chords. So, for example, instead of making this an A minor, I will make this into I'll make it into a C sharp, this one, and now all of a sudden this chord became an A major chord. And you know, you might think this is the same as secondary dominants, but it's not, because if I would continue my chord progression, let's say my chord progression would have been 1 6 4 5. So I'm going to write F. There we go. I'm just going to finish the chord progression quickly so you can see how they function, because otherwise it has no use. F A C. And we have, there we go. Okay, and again, don't mind the voice leading. This is just for examples. So here we have our F major chord, and we have our G major chord. And I'm going to write the scale degrees also. So let me first play to you what the original chord progression would sound like, and it will come back on the tonic chord. So let me do it like this. I want them to have them in one row. Okay, there we go. I'm going to play the chord progression now. So this sounds, yeah, you know, regular, maybe even a bit dull. But what I'm going to do now is, as you can see, these chords are a third apart, so they have a mediant relationship. So I'm going to change this into a C sharp, and that's all I'm going to do. And that's going to create such a different sound to it. Just let's listen. So you see, this all of a sudden is an A major. And in my previous example down, because I want to show you how they are different from a secondary dominance, because as you can see here, what I did here is that this, let me just delete this chord to make it clearer. As you can see here, this was the dominant of the D minor. So this one had a very strong tendency to resolve to the D minor, which is then like seen as a tonic. But with chromatic mediants, if I go back to here, to this chord, with chromatic mediants, that's not the case. With chromatic mediants, you just alter one note, and that's it. And it just creates such an interesting sound. And also, for example, what I could do is, because I don't have to stop here, because chords can have either a minor third relationship. So these are, for example, minor third apart, the bass notes. But they can also be a major third apart. So I can lower this, make this into an A flat. Of course, I need to do it here also. And I'm going to make it into an A flat major chord. So now, also the difference that you can see now is they only have one note in common now, these two chords. And before, they used to have two notes in common. So the C sharp, the C and the C here have in common. And the cool thing is that this chord is completely foreign to the key of C major that we were in. But they use this a lot in film music, and it's incredibly effective. Let's listen. So, and if I just quickly copy this progression and undo, how many bars do I have here? And just undo what I had before. So you see, so I can give you some good material for comparison. I'll just only play it to the F chord so you can hear the connection. Okay, now. So this chord really sticks out. So this is a chromatic mediant, and I can also undo this. I can also add another chromatic mediant. For example, it doesn't have to be like this. I can also, these chords also have a third relationship, as you can see. We go here a major third down. So we have our A minor. It goes to the F major. So we can also create this make this into a chromatic mediant. Let's see how that sounds. And let's see how inspired I am. What I could do is, instead of making, this is now a major third distance between the A and the F, but I can also make it into a minor third, for example. What I have to do in that case is I just raise the F sharp here, and of course I have it above here also. I'm going to create it into an F sharp minor chord. So I need to raise a C sharp here as well. And now all of a sudden, I have a chromatic mediant chord here. So you see, this chord really sounds like it's out of place. And what you hear a lot, what happens is then that you alternate between these chords. That creates even more friction, so to speak. So let me show you. I'm just going to copy this here. Let's see. So you see, this happens a lot in film music, and actually I made a full video about chromatic mediants, and yeah, it's just so great. And you know, you can, even if you have a full song, because now I'm just showing you short examples, because I don't have any long pieces prepared for you, but sorry, I lost my words. The thing is, you can also incidentally add a chromatic mediant. So, you know, for example, you know, a lot of music nowadays just works on a loop of 4 chords, so to speak. But there's also music where you have a chord progression that develops a bit more. So you have more chords. And or even actually in a loop. For example, you have a loop 3 times. You have the, let me delete this here. Oh, that's not what I wanted. So for example, what you could do is you have, this is a loop, and you play this chord progression 1, 2, 3, 4. You play this 4 times. You have it 4 times that it circles from beginning to end. And only in the last round you can add a chromatic mediant. So you don't have to do it every round, for example. I don't have the score here to one of my previous examples where I did add chromatic mediant. Actually, let me see if I can find that one. It is these of the Phrygian chord progressions. There we go. Actually, so now I opened the sheet music of one of my episodes. This one was about 4 Phrygian chord progressions. And here I applied the same technique. So I will need to give you a little bit of an introduction. But here, let me zoom in here into this example. And this is really why I love it. I love this so much, this technique. So this piece is in E Phrygian, but E Phrygian uses the notes from the C major scale. Just I don't want to complicate things, but okay, so it's E Phrygian. So we're not supposed to have any sharps or flats. And as you can see, this adheres to it. So we have an E minor, that's normal. We have a C major, we have an A minor. Everything is normal. But now when we come towards the end of the example, all of a sudden we have an A major. And this A major has a chromatic mediant relationship. It has a mediant relationship with the C. Because if I would, as you can see here on my keyboard, now it's highlighting the A note. And if I go all the way up to the C, you can see that they have a third distance, a minor third distance. But if it was diatonic, so when it sticks to all the notes that are part of the key, it should be a C natural, not a C sharp. And as you can see, an A major has a C sharp. So that's the interesting thing. That you, and maybe I can even play the example to you here. Let me find that. Let me just quickly see if I can quickly play this example to you. I just need to find where I have the episode stored. Just 1 second. For Phrygian chord progressions. Where are we? Yes. Go. Audio examples. And then this was example number 4. Okay, let's have a listen. So you notice that chord, everything sounds okay. I mean, I like the example, but especially when you get to this, that ba da dee dee, that chord really shines, because we're used to having an A minor chord here every time, but now all of a sudden we have an A major chord, and that's why I find this technique of chromatic mediants to be so interesting. Because it doesn't only influence the chord, because as you can see, when I go back to here, let me make this how it was in the example. So for example, if we have our A minor chord again here, and if I play in the melody, I also need to play a C, which is the minor third. But when I make this into an A major chord, I cannot play the C natural anymore. I need to play a C sharp. So it also influences your melody. And you can see that happened here also, because you see, I play a C sharp here. So I'll play it one more time for you to give it a quick listen and really try. And I follow with my mouse where we are. So really try to listen to how much brightness this chord adds. So I hope I answered your question with what technique I find to be very good for chord progressions. So number one is chromatic mediants. For me, that's always the most interesting. Then I also look for secondary dominants. And then another thing, yeah, exactly. You know, the mood shift is really it's amazing, and because I don't want to keep referring to the other episode, but the thing is, you know, it can create a completely different world, while you only change one note, for example. And that's the difference between a secondary dominant and a chromatic mediant, is that the secondary dominant, this one wants to resolve towards the chord that is a fifth below. And with a chromatic mediant, you don't have to do that. You're not stuck to this resolving thing. You only adjust a couple of notes, and you're there, and you can use it in your melody and everything. So that's incredibly useful. And as I said, I really like to experiment with writing in a certain mode. And especially if you're not used to writing in modes, it might be difficult in the beginning. And you need to watch out, for example, when you're writing in, let's say, the Phrygian mode. Let me also take the screen to the webcam. When you're writing in a certain mode, you really need to practice with finding what chord progressions work. Because, for example, if you're in the Phrygian mode, you might want to drift off to the parent major scale, which is, for example, an E Phrygian. That would be C, and especially the Lydian mode is quite unstable when it comes to this. But that also is very interesting because it gives you new opportunities, because you need to also work with your melody in that mode that you're writing in. So that's very inspirational to discover, and definitely good practice. Let's see. I don't know if there are any other questions, because I think also for now, because I don't want to drift off too much. So otherwise, I think I'll end the live stream for now. Just want to see if there are any other questions. I mean, do you have anything else that you would like to know? So, and I'm thinking about if you well, it's okay, Teun, if you have anything that you want to ask, if you have any question that you if anything is on your mind, like music, technically speaking, maybe you're working on something and you have a certain technique that you want to try out, that you have a question about. So feel free to ask. I can still jump in on it quickly. Yeah, great. Yeah. So because I got the question, I started off with modal stuff. Yeah, I'll prepare something with how to, for the next live stream. I want to do I want to work live on yeah. So for the next live stream, I want to work on writing in different modes. Of course, I want to show then also how you create the different modes, how you create new modes, because that sometimes leads to questions, and I have a feeling that many times people make it more difficult than it actually is. And also maybe next time, because it's also nice that because I remember Teun wrote to me about writing in the harmonic minor mode. So that's also something very interesting. So I think for next time, I'll make the live stream about the minor mode, so the natural minor mode and the harmonic minor mode. And how do you use the melodic minor scale? Where does it come from? And then also, I think it's nice to dive into writing and learning how to write the different modes and how do we create them, what makes them unique, you know, what separates Dorian from Phrygian, and why is it actually quite easy to make these scales, and why are people always overcomplicating things. So I think that's a lot of interesting stuff to dive in for next time. And if there are no more questions, then unfortunately I don't have my let me just switch to my main view. Unfortunately, I don't have the possibility to play the outro theme, but of course I want to always end in style. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And for now, see you next time. Thanks for watching, and thanks for joining.